Welcome back, everyone. Hope you're doing amazing. Why and how the Battle of Teutoburg happened, and who is Varus? I don't know who Varus is. Battle of Teutoburg Forest. I've heard about it. I've actually never done any studying on it or videos on it ever. I just know they got ambushed, and it wasn't good for the Romans. So I already know too much. I need to know more context. I'm Shields, as you can see above my head. This is what we do. We do reactions to history videos. So leave me some video suggestions in the comments and let's rock and roll. Kings and generals.
Publius Quinctilius Varus was one of the many young Roman boys who grew up in the shadow of civil war, faced with a future of extreme political violence. Instead, he maneuvered his way out of his family's disgrace and into Augustus's inner circle, becoming a prodigy and a trusted hand in the governorship, only to fall from this family redemption with one sudden and shocking catastrophe. In this fifth video on the history of Rome's Julio-Claudian dynasty, we will tell the story of two men at the battle that shook Rome to its core, the Battle of the Teutoburg Forest. Every week we release 3 Teutoburgian get eruption. Like many young men in the late Republic, Publius Quinctilius Varus was born into a world of political machination and civil war.
Yeah, can you imagine? It's all you really know is war. People that were born in the 1st century BCE, man, you have trauma. You have some trauma.
The son of Sextus Quinctilius Varus, the Quinctilii Vari had been an unimportant and unremarkable family for some 4 centuries. The last member of their clan to have served as consul.
Yeah, because that's all that matters sometimes, is like what your family that you were born in. How back are you? Are you like a are you one of wealth? I don't even mean wealth in terms of monetary stuff, but I mean in class. I mean in consulships. I mean in equites and so forth. There you were built either as a novo homo, or you were birthed as a I don't know how you would say it. Basically the opposite of a novo homo. There's got to be a word for that though.
Having done so in 453 BCE. His father had held the office of quaestor shortly before Varus's birth, in about 46 to 44 BCE. But made the politically inconvenient decision to side with the faction of the Roman Senate which stood against a certain Julius Caesar.
I mean, as did a lot of people.
While Caesar apparently pardoned Sextus, he later committed suicide in 42 BCE at the Battle of Philippi, leaving Publius and his sisters in uncertain circumstances. It seems another family member, such as their possible uncle Quinctilius Varus, may have taken them in and managed Varus's education and preparation for public life.
Okay.
Varus entered the public arena shortly after his coming of age, at about 14 to 16 years old, just in time to avoid being thrust into the last of the civil wars. While he likely served as a tribunus beginning around 26 BCE, by this point in time, there was effectively only one political faction to support, that of Augustus.
Yeah, I mean, if you don't support Augustus, you're pretty much ousted at this point. You're pretty much going to be an individual that's going to be on the fringe of society, because Augustus is the state. I mean, not in terms of like title, but all but title.
It is very likely that Varus was sponsored for his tribuneship through his probable mother's family connections to the Claudii Marcelli, and followed Marcus Claudius Marcellus to Spain. It is here, in Augustus's final personally led military campaign, that Varus likely came to the new princeps' attention. In 22 BCE, Varus was appointed to the post of his father, that of quaestor, and handpicked by Augustus to serve on a tour of the east between 22 to 19 BCE. Traveling to Tenos, Athens, and Pergamon, Varus conducted finance and administration of grants and taxes levied from these cities and others throughout the tour. Varus's tenure under Augustus was extremely successful, seeing him build an immense rapport with the new administration and pushing his career the furthest anyone in his family had been in centuries.
That's huge. Basically, you are the most legendary figure of your family so far, Varus.
He achieved the posts of aedile and praetor.
Wow.
Varus appears again in the historical record in 15 BCE at Dangstetten, the base of the 19th Legion, as their legatus legionis. The course of the 19th Legion in these years is well attested, and Varus likely took part in Tiberius and Drusus's war in the Alps. Upon his return to Rome in 14 to 13 BCE, Varus married the 12-year-old Vipsania Marcella, the daughter.
Well, I mean, no comment. Just no comment on that one.
Daughter of Marcus Agrippa, an incredible leap in prestige for the still young military prodigy. His new status as the brother-in-law of Tiberius must have come through close connections he had during his Eastern Tour and Alpine War. This was reflected in their subsequent joint consulship of 13 BCE, the height of Varus's political prestige.
Wow.
Moreover, his subsequent absence from the post may have been a result of the death of Agrippa, Drusus's rise, and Tiberius's unexpected self-exile. Little is known of Varus's career between the years 12 and 8 BCE, although it is probable he served under Drusus or Tiberius as a legionary legate again. In 8 BCE, Varus was appointed to the proconsular governorship of Africa.
Dang, like he's getting around.
Of which the sources make no notes on his tenure there, suggesting that his experience as quaestor prepared him to manage the province's grain supply effectively. By the end of his year in office in Africa, he was transferred to the governorship of Syria as Legatus Augustus Pro Praetore, where we discussed the events of his tenure in our previous episode. Varus's suppression of the Jewish revolt in the wake
I must have missed that episode.
of Herod's death proved him capable and effective in the eyes of Augustus, and he was even lauded by the later Jewish historian Josephus. Velleius Paterculus claims that Varus spent his time as governor embezzling funds and becoming a rich man. Still, as Varus must have already been extremely wealthy to have held senatorial office, this claim seems to be unsubstantiated. Little is known about Varus's career after he left his governorship in Syria between 4 and 1 BCE. It is likely that due to Tiberius's exile, he may have also fallen from Augustus's graces.
Why did Tiberius get exiled?
As he was overshadowed by Gaius Caesar and Lucius Caesar. By 2 BCE, Varus's second wife, Vipsania Marcella, had either died or divorced Varus, and Varus's family ties were renewed in coincidence with Tiberius's return to Rome in 2 CE and return to office in 4 CE through his marriage to Claudia Pulchra, who was Augustus's niece and Tiberius's cousin. Tiberius's return in 4 CE after the deaths of Lucius and Gaius likely marked improved prospects for Varus in the regime. While his reappearance in the sources leaves his political career in these years unclear, by 4 CE, he had been restored to Augustus's graces.
So we're back to the Rhine. Of course, this is where Drusus met his ill fate with a horsey. But all right, Varus, you're up there in no man's land, basically,
and entrusted to take control of the new conquests in Germania.
Not a small task.
Varus's tenure in Germania is agreed upon by both ancient and modern historians to have been the cause of a renewed revolt. While Varus did not begin the process of Romanization in the region, which had already been underway for nearly 2 decades, he dramatically accelerated it. Before Varus's tenure, the Romans had already begun introducing their civic and economic customs to the Germanic peoples, with a focus on holding markets and curial councils. Several mining operations existed in the Sauerland region, and the Romans had started building the first large towns, such as that near Voltgrams, which possessed a Roman plan with an open-air forum in the center. The changes Varus brought were the imposition of more cultural and legal customs on the Germanic people.
So basically, you're just going in there and just colonizing. Very simple.
The latter of which reignited resistance to Roman authority. Cassius Dio also states that Varus may have imposed the first financial tribute on the Germanic peoples, which
That's gonna hurt the relations.
he claims was the instigator of the revolt.
Yeah.
The mastermind behind the revolt of 9 CE was a man named Arminius, who was born the son of Segemerus, chieftain of the Germanic Cherusci tribe. Segemerus brokered a peace agreement under Drusus's tenure and exchanged his sons, Arminius and Flavius, as diplomatic hostages at the age of about 6. Consequently, Arminius and Flavius were raised in Rome, in the custody of an unknown elite family.
That's crazy to think about because these barbarians are now taken under the wing of a Roman elite, which gives them the opportunity to see Roman high society, which is such a contrast probably to where they're from.
Arminius became fluent in Latin and was poised on the social ladder to become tribunus of a new cavalry ala formed from the Cherusci, much like the Roman youths who would climb the Cursus Honorum. He served in the Armenian conflict from 1 BCE to 4 CE, where he likely earned his name for distinguished service, before later campaigning in the Illyrian revolt under the forces of Tiberius. At this time, Arminius had been granted citizenship and raised to the status of equites, placing him among Rome's plutocratic elite, before returning to Germania to become chieftain of the Cherusci in 7 to 8 CE at the age of about 26. Arminius almost certainly continued in his military service, with ancient authors
Music got so loud right there.
noting that he dined with Varus as a friend and trusted companion early in the governorship.
Okay.
Apparently, it was during this time that Arminius was already building an extensive web of connections and supporters to enact a highly organized uprising against the Romans.
Okay, so he probably saw, what he could become by curiously in both the East and Rome, and he understands the systematic approach that Rome can build. So he's like, why can't I be great?
The precise motivation and timing of Arminius' revolt was likely a result of the attempted campaign against Marbodus and the Marcomanni, followed by the outbreak of the Great Illyrian Revolt. Dr. Joanne Ball postulates that Arminius had seen firsthand that Rome only considered his people as allies if they remained subservient, and that the moment they had the military strength or political bluster to demand Rome consider them an equal, she would betray them. Arminius likely served in the initial stage of the Illyrian War in 6 to 7 CE, and saw firsthand how badly the Romans fared against guerrilla tactics.
We'll have to check that one out. I don't think we've seen the Illyrian War at all.
Similar to his people's own. He also witnessed the desperate commitment of military and economic resources to the Illyrian conflict. Governors' terms were typically granted for 3-year periods, meaning that the rapport Arminius had built with Varus could come to its maximum in 9 CE. Arminius preyed on Varus's apparent assumption that the population was completely pacified, even ignoring a warning of a rebellion by a Germanic leader who was loyal to Rome named Segestes in favor of Arminius. This was no surprise, as Arminius was a loyal Roman citizen and equites, whereas Segestes was neither, and additionally had a personal feud with Arminius.
So there's gonna have an internal strife against each other to see who will rule this region, perhaps.
Arminius' revolt was prepared through the summoning of military detachments to various settlements across Germania throughout 7 to 9 CE by his co-conspirators for security purposes, in order to disperse and weaken the main body of the Roman army. He then fabricated reports of a revolt in the northern regions, apparently interpreted as minor in scale, but serious enough that Varus would decide to keep his forces together in order to address it. Having set out along the Weser to show the colors in the summer of 9 CE, the Romans probably camped at Porta Westphalica just south of Minden, about 60 kilometers from the Calcrisa battlefield. Large numbers of women and children accompanied the army, along with what Dio reports as an unusually large and ostentatious baggage train for a campaign, suggesting that the situation was largely expected to be resolved diplomatically. Arminius himself, as Varus's trusted companion, was able to directly advise him on the nature of the revolt and the recommended route, allowing him to draw the Romans directly into the ravines of the Teutoburg Fold.
So basically, he is feeding him an ambush.
Discipline was allowed to slip severely, as the veteran soldiers mingled with their families and other camp followers among the baggage train, rather than correctly positioning themselves in a marching column with a rearguard. Either Varus failed to send out scouts to ensure the safety of the route,
Obviously.
or relied entirely on Arminius and other Germanic auxiliary troops loyal to him to do so, setting a perfect trap. Arminius and his forces were excused and allowed to separate from the main column, presumably to collect more allied troops and friendly chiefs to parley with Varus. Instead, they collected a large body of hostile co-conspirators, their personal retainers, and the other forces they could muster from their cantons.
So what's the end goal here? Arminius to reunite Germania and become the de facto leader?
A mass slaughter of the Roman detachments across Germania began, probably on a prearranged date, as Arminius turned his coalition to meet Varus at Calcrisa.
Historian Michael McNally suggests that earlier battle of Arusio against Drusus had heavily influenced Arminius' strategy. It was only through the failure of an uncoordinated assault that the Romans were able to escape.
Arminius' success
That does remember. I do remember that, and it feels very parallel to this.
in the battle came from his use of the local forces' extensive knowledge of the terrain, combined with significant numbers of Roman-trained Germanic auxiliary units able to lead the less experienced or untrained forces in a coordinated ambush against the Roman column. Arminius was able to muster a considerable number of forces from the Angivari, Marsi, Bructeri, Chatti, Matiacti, Usipetes, and his own Cherusci, along with various trained Roman auxiliary units, possibly totaling around 17,000 to 18,000 men.
And how many do the Romans have?
The attack was conducted when the Romans had completely engulfed themselves in the Teutoburg Forest, approaching a fork in the path that Arminius' allies had prepared as a misdirection, with a false road following an earthwork wall. Archaeological finds reveal the course of the battle, which can be coupled with the descriptions of Paterculus, Dio, Florus, Tacitus, and other historians to reconstruct it extensively. The ambush began during an intense downpour. Missiles, most likely javelins, were hurled at the Roman column from over the embankment and out of the marsh. The assault took place along multiple points on the column, spreading confusion and panic, but it seems to have focused on the front and middle of the column. Varus's forces could not effectively respond to the attack, and hunkering down at their current position would have left them completely exposed. Therefore, he opted to move forwards towards the Calcrisa Pass, an area that was partially cultivated, despite its path winding through sand.
The progress of the first day is evident in the finds, which consist of loose items dropped along the roads leading east to southwest of the fort, the bodies of the wounded and dead abandoned elsewhere in the battle, alongside abandoned wagons and animals. So basically panic ensued.
Bars and a thick marsh. Despite the effectiveness of Arminius' initial ambush, the Roman response was disciplined and coordinated,
Seems
even
that way.
including medical treatment and the erection of a camp on the open pastures of modern Uberesh.
So so far, I don't think it's a success on Arminius' part at all so far.
Just west of the False Fork and past the end of the embankment. Overnight, the decision was made to abandon the baggage train and conduct a rapid march back to the Rhine in order to break free of the ambush. The next morning opened well for the Romans, who emerged from their hastily constructed marching camp and were able to form a partial battle line on the Uberesh pastures. Arminius, however, outmaneuvered Varus's forces, drawing them into a heavily wooded area, which was likely down the false path they had staged.
So they did a feigned retreat to an ambush.
Following the base of Calcrisa Hill. Attempting to reform, the Romans mounted a charge, but were quickly disrupted by the thick forest and marshy terrain, which caused them to stumble over their own soldiers. It was at this point they took the heaviest of losses and began to abandon the wounded. The third day is lost in the sources, but may have followed similar events to the second.
The Roman shields would have doubled in weight from being waterlogged. Ooh, that's crazy. While wooden sword hilts would have swollen, reserve pila would have been completely gone, and bows and slings were useless. Horses panicked, food was mixed with dirt and blood, and nothing was dry due to the uprooting of goatskin tents by the wind. Wow. So basically, everything's gone wrong. The weather has not created a better environment for the Romans. And do they know that this is Arminius so far? Or do they think this is like some bandits? Or not bandits, because that sounds so weak. But like some barbaric tribes just trying to win the day here.
The final assault occurred on the fourth day, and it was here that the Romans finally lost their discipline and cohesion as a force, descending into panic. By this point, days of constant downpours and strong winds had made them unable to fight effectively. Varus, who was wounded but still alive at this point, decided to commit suicide with his senior officers. As panic set in, other Roman soldiers joined in, committing mass suicide rather than being captured, humiliated, enslaved, or mass sacrificed. The remaining Roman cavalry officer to whom command had fallen, Vallanumonius, deserted the infantry and attempted to fight through to the Rhine, but was cut down along the path out of Calcrisa. At least some of the cavalry and infantry did indeed manage to find the correct pass and escape. These men had fled north, either along the real path or into the marsh, where archaeologists have found their fallen comrades. Those who were captured were mutilated, with their eyes gouged out, hands cut off, tongues cut out, and mouths sewn shut.
Yeah, they didn't like these guys. They hated the Romans.
The captured tribunes and centurions were sacrificed, and many soldiers were chained and sold into slavery or ransomed to their families for exorbitant sums. The eagles of the 17th, 18th, and 19th legions were lost, and they were so completely destroyed that these units would never be restored.
Asprenas was the nephew of Varus and praised by ancient sources for his rapid and capable response to the disaster, effectively taking command of the region until Tiberius arrived. Okay.
After looting the battlefield, Arminius quickly advanced his forces along the Rhine, as more and more peoples joined the revolt, but was stymied by the arrival of Lucius Nonius Asprenas with the 1st and 5th legions. Arminius turned south, destroying Roman military installations in Germania until he reached Aliso, to which he laid siege. The Romans at the site were led by the Prefectus Castrorum Lucius Caedicius, who mounted an effective defense with the local garrison and survivors of Teutoburg, as Arminius' forces had little experience in siegecraft. By the time the siege broke, the Illyrian War had been concluded, with Tiberius arriving in Germania at the head of a large number of reinforcements, prompting most of Arminius' army to withdraw, but for a token force to starve Aliso out. The Romans under Caedicius snuck out of Aliso under cover of night and rainfall, but were betrayed by the shouting and cries of the women and children who followed.
Wow.
The Germanic warriors descended on them, but the Romans held their discipline and cohesion as their attention turned to looting the baggage train. Seeing an opening, the Romans tricked them into retreat by sounding a double march with the trumpet, faking the arrival of Asprenas' forces. With the rebels fleeing the battle, the Romans turned west, and the last of their forces made it to the safety of the Rhine. Augustus's response to the disaster was dramatic. Allegedly, upon receiving word of the disaster, he exclaimed, "Quinctilius Varus, give me back my legions," as claimed in the account of Suetonius. His administrative response reflected desperation. Augustus ordered the confiscation of estates of 20% of men under 35, 10% of men over that age, and the reenlistment of both citizen and peregrine veterans to force a replenishment of the army.
Did he really think that it was something that was going to... Was this more out of anger or fear?
He ordered governors who were preparing to vacate their posts to remain for the time being, believing
So this is like, this is emergency.
it would reassure the population of stability, and prepared games dedicated to Jupiter Optimus Maximus for divine protection. Germanic immigrants and soldiers were dismissed from their posts and asked to leave the city of Rome. When word reached Augustus that Tiberius had arrived on the Rhine to stabilize the situation, his state of shock gave way to his pragmatic leadership ability as he prepared to seek revenge. Next time, we'll return to Germania to explore the career of its avenger, Germanicus, and finish out Augustus's reign with Tiberius's succession.
Wow. Yeah, I think we missed an episode, but leave me those gaps down below. I'll try to search as well. Poor Varus. I mean, this is just betrayal. This is the story of betrayal. And opportunist Arminius, obviously he's still at large here, it seems that way, and it seems that Germania is quite a difficult place to subdue. It's no Gaul. It's definitely no Gaul. Appreciate you guys as always. You have a great rest of your day. Peace out, and bye-bye.